Hello and welcome. I'm Jack Fink, and you're watching Eye on Politics on CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth. The final sprint is underway to the political finish line. Election Day, November 8th. A new poll is out of likely Texas voters by the University of Houston and Texas Southern University. In the governor's race, it shows incumbent Greg Abbott leading Democrat Beto O'Rourke by 7 percentage points, 49 to 42%. O'Rourke made one of his final stops on his 49-day, 5,600-mile tour across Texas in Denton. Last week, Governor Abbott visited Allen and Fairview. Each candidate calls the other extreme when it comes to the issue of abortion.
That we are in the fight of our lives.
Before hundreds of people at the Denton Civic Center, Democrat Beto O'Rourke made clear a key part of his fight to unseat Governor Greg Abbott is over access to abortion in Texas.
And I know that we're going to win because we are fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body.
The state's new law bans most abortions, including in cases of rape and incest, with the only exception to save the mother's life. A recent poll here in Texas says 55% of those surveyed believe abortion should be legal in most or all cases, while 44% said it should be illegal in most or all cases. O'Rourke blames Abbott and calls the law extreme.
I'm making this a priority because women are under attack in this state unlike any moment in this state's history, at least.
While campaigning in Allen last week, I asked the governor about the state's new law. And did Texas Republicans go too far?
So on abortion, it's Beto who's an extremist, because what Beto believes in is not only abortion of a fully developed baby to the very last second before that baby is born. He is even against a law that was proposed that would have required a doctor to provide medical care to a baby who survives abortion. That is murder.
What do you say to that?
It's completely false, and it is part of his scare tactics. He wants voters to be afraid because he knows that he is so out of line and out of step with the Texas electorate.
As a congressman, O'Rourke voted against a bill that would have required doctors to provide aid to a baby that survived an abortion. At the time, he said the existing law already required doctors to do so, and that he was concerned the proposal would have left doctors facing criminal charges and lawsuits. Analysts say the abortion issue has mobilized Democrats and some independents as well. The same University of Houston, Texas Southern University poll shows in the lieutenant governor's race, Republican Dan Patrick leads Democrat Mike Collier by 6 percentage points, 49 to 43%. In the Attorney General's race, Republican Ken Paxton leads Democrat Rochelle Garza by 3 percentage points, 45 to 42%. Most of the candidates campaigned in North Texas this week. Paxton appeared in Plano while Garza visited Dallas. And Collier also came to town after scoring an endorsement from a well-known Republican leader that raised some eyebrows.
Rochelle Garza, I am your Democratic nominee for Texas Attorney General.
Democratic candidate Rochelle Garza told Dallas County Democrats she's fighting for the children and families of Texas. In an interview, she told me that means consumer protection and for abortion rights.
So abortion rights is on the ballot in November, and a vote for a Democrat, a vote for myself, is a vote for abortion rights.
Yeah. We're not interviewing today, y'all.
At the Collin County Republican Party rally in Plano, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton didn't take reporters' questions, but he told supporters he's fighting to save the state of Texas against what he calls the federal government's efforts to trample over the state's rights.
I think we've now sued the Biden administration 32 times in less than 2 years, as we are literally fighting for this thing we call the U.S. Constitution.
Paxton still faces a trial on state felony fraud charges 7 years after he was indicted, and he's reportedly under investigation by the FBI on allegations of bribery made by his former top lieutenants. Paxton has denied any wrongdoing, and both candidates say their opponents are wrong for Texas. In addition to both candidates for Texas Attorney General campaigning here in North Texas, the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor also appeared here in Dallas. Mike Collier just won the backing of Tarrant County Judge Glenn Whitley, a Republican.
I was very pleased and very honored that he endorsed my campaign.
Collier told me he believes state Republican leaders are to blame for high property taxes.
And Dan Patrick always says he's going to bring them down, but they always go up. It's because they aren't honest about it.
In response to the endorsement, Patrick tweeted, quote, "It's no surprise Judge Whitley, who made Tarrant County property taxes among the highest in Texas, doesn't get it. People are being taxed out of their homes by big spending local governments." Collier acknowledged he's behind Patrick in the polls, but says because it's only by single digits, he believes he can close the gap. As you saw, we interviewed both Collier and Garza, and we will play those interviews in their entirety coming up on Eye on Politics. Paxton declined an interview. Other news making headlines this week, Uvalde students returned to school for the first time since the deadly mass shooting that killed 19 students and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School. Some parents sent their children to private school this year, and others decided to homeschool their children. Some security enhancements have already been made by Uvalde CISD, and others will be made in the future. Also this week, Governor Abbott discussed the power grid reliability with the incoming CEO of ERCOT, Pablo Vegas, who starts October 1st, along with the interim president, Brad Jones, and Public Utility Commission of Texas Chair Peter Lake. The leaders said ERCOT has sufficient resources to meet the power demand this fall. While campaigning in Dallas, we spoke with Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor Mike Collier. He discussed his endorsement by Tarrant County Judge Glenn Whitley, a Republican, and the top issues he believes Texans are facing.
Well, you know, Jack, I've been traveling the state now for months talking to Texans about the problems that we face, like fixing the damn grid, like a property tax problem that's exploding, funding for public education and so forth. As somebody coming out of the business world, I solve problems for a living. I talk to Texans about what are the problems, how are we going to solve them, what's my point of view, what's your point of view. And Texans really, really respond to that. Is the state better off now than it was 8 years ago? The answer is no. We've got a lot of problems that are building up. When I talk to Texans about that, they don't feel like, in my judgment, that this is really a D versus R fight. It feels to them like who's the better leader to solve these problems. So that's the path to victory, and we feel very good about it.
So let me ask you, as far as you were recently endorsed by Tarrant County Judge Glenn Whitley, a Republican. Were you surprised, and why not? And what does this say about your campaign?
I was not surprised. I was very pleased and very honored that he endorsed my campaign. I talked to a lot of Republicans in my personal life, my professional life. I talked to a lot of county officials. There's a lot of support for me. I think what he did is he gave voice to what a lot of local leaders are saying and thinking, which is that the state is a bad partner. The state is no longer for local control, particularly Dan Patrick. The state is not, and Dan Patrick particularly, not being honest about property taxes. So their constituents are angry and confused. Why do our property taxes keep going up? And Dan Patrick always says he's going to bring them down, but they always go up. It's because they aren't honest about it. Now, Judge Whitley's an accountant, and I'm an accountant. And we look at the data, and we know what the facts are. And he's very unhappy, and he knows that I know how to solve these problems. And that's why he endorsed me.
And so you mentioned a couple issues, but what do you think is the most important issue facing Texans right now, and what's your solution?
Well, we have to fix the damn grid. If we don't do that, we're in real trouble. They are not taking the steps needed to fix the grid. It is not a question of if it will fail. It's only a question of when it will fail. Solving the problems with the grid have many, many months of lead time. We can't delay. So that's a very, very big part of why I'm running for lieutenant governor. Also, we need to fund public education, and everyone knows that. Teachers are very unhappy. Some 65% are thinking about changing and doing something else. If we don't get education right, we're not going to get anything right. And then property taxes are going up, 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 and they're going to keep going up, Jack, until we have an honest accounting about the corporate tax loopholes which starve the state of funds, shifting the burden onto homeowners. Those are the things that are most important at this stage, in my opinion.
A lot of Democrats are talking about abortion rights at this point. And so my question to you is, how important is this issue to your campaign?
It's important, and voters know where I stand. I've always been pro-choice. Because of the Dobbs decision and the trigger law, which, by the way, was written and driven down people's throats by Dan Patrick. That means that a woman has to carry a rapist baby. If they're a victim of incest, same thing. Women will die as a consequence of this, and folks know this, and it is not right, and they're very, very angry, and there'll be a lot of voters that vote for me for that reason. But there's a lot of other problems too. I think when I talk to women, they say, Mike, we know where you stand. and we need that. We really are pleased that you're campaigning on such things as the grid, schools, property taxes, because we know where you stand, and we will be voting for you.
My last question to you is this, and I appreciate your time, and that is, you've got the latest Dallas Morning News poll said you're behind by 8 points. How are you going to make up that ground? It's still a Republican state by every analyst's point of view. It's still the Republicans to lose.
Well, we have our work to do. We have our work to do in the next 2 months. You know, people come back from Labor Day and they start thinking about the election and trying to make their decision. You'll see an awful lot of people sort of tune in to what we're doing for the first time. There'll be plenty of information about me in the digital world, and we'll be doing the things that you do on TV and the rest to get the message out. We saw 4 years ago when I ran that it was very, very effective. When people heard my message, coming out of the business world to solve problems, they're very responsive to it. We have 2 months. We're in single digits. We can close the gap and win.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We also spoke with Democratic candidate for Attorney General Rochelle Garza about her priorities and her path to victory.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And our path to victory is by reaching every single voter in the state of Texas and educating them on this race. I'm running against criminally indicted Ken Paxton, and we need to let voters know that he does not deserve to be in office. He is unfit for office, and that I am going to fight for them. I'm here to fight for families and for the children of Texas.
For your race as Attorney General, what do you think is the biggest issue facing Texans, and what is your solution?
The biggest issue facing Texans is that we have leadership that isn't responsive to our families and to our needs. Ken Paxton has been under criminal indictment for more than 7 years. He is more concerned about staying out of prison than he is about serving the people of Texas. I'm here to fight for the children and the families of the state of Texas. That means fighting for consumer protection, making sure that the power grid failure has accountability, and fighting for everyday Texans.
And so a lot of Democrats are talking about abortion rights. You're among them. So how important is that to your campaign?
Abortion rights is absolutely critical. We have seen a complete obliteration of a woman's right to choose in the state of Texas. It is completely outlawed, and Ken Paxton has made sure through litigation that doctors cannot provide life-saving care to people who need an emergency abortion in an ER. This is absolutely critical. People are going to die. People are already dying in the state of Texas. So abortion rights is on the ballot in November, and a vote for a Democrat, a vote for myself, is a vote for abortion rights.
I was going to ask you, the new state law makes an exception for not allowing an abortion if it saves the life of the mother. So are you referring to something else as far as?
The trigger ban, so it outlaws abortion in cases of rape or incest, and it has a very broad but also vague exception for when the mother's life is under threat. And so that means that doctors have to wait right up until a woman is septic before they do something to protect her life. Ken Paxton litigated to challenge that. He challenged the federal government's ability to tell doctors to provide life-saving care. That includes in Texas. So you cannot get life-saving care in an emergency room when you're having a miscarriage because of Ken Paxton.
Let me ask you about voters' rights. He was in Plano today, Ken Paxton was, and he was saying that if Texans elect you, that you oppose the voting rights legislation. So if you're elected, will you enforce the state law? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Voting rights is absolutely fundamental, and anyone who is eligible to vote should be allowed to vote. I want to make sure we have a fully funded civil rights division that protects the right to vote, not makes it harder for people. What we've seen is a concerted effort on Ken Paxton's behalf and on the top Republican leadership's behalf to make it harder for people to vote. That means elderly people, people with disabilities that are having a hard time submitting a mail-in ballot and having it thrown out. That's not something that I would support. I want to make sure that if you are eligible to vote, that you have the right to exercise that right.
Republicans say they want to make sure people don't cheat, and they want to be able to make sure that anybody who votes by mail is going through the same ID requirements that people have to do when they show up at the ballot box, at the polling places. Thoughts on that?
Look, Ken Paxton tried to undermine the 2020 election. He wasted our taxpayer money on challenging the 2020 election, and he may lose his law license because of it. Oh, and he's also making sure that our tax dollars go to protecting his license. So he is not pro-voting. He is not for voting rights. This is a red herring. I want to make sure that if you are eligible to vote in the state of Texas, that you have absolute access to that.
My last question to you is just going back to the abortion issue. If you are elected, will you, and the state law is the law right now, will you enforce it, or will you do everything you can to discourage enforcement?
Look, there is no right more fundamental than having the ability to decide if, when, or how to become a mother. I'm a mom myself. I have a 5-month-old daughter, and I want her to grow up in a state where she can decide for herself. And I know that every single Texan out there is concerned about their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, and we need to restore abortion access in the state of Texas. Women's lives, we're not expendable. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to die. And the laws that we have right now, it's not only against the will of the people, because the people want access to abortion care, but we don't want women to die. That's not who we are. That's not Texas.
Rochelle Garza, thank you so much. We appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on Eye on Politics. I'm Jack Fink. See you next week. You're watching CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth.